The day my brother pointed his service weapon at my chest, I was thinking about coffee. That's the thing nobody tells you about high-stakes moments. Your brain doesn't rise to the occasion. It retreats to the mundane. I'd been on the road since 4 in the morning, driving from Columbus to Cincinnati on a stretch of I-71 that turns gray and featureless in February. And all I could think about was that I hadn't stopped for coffee. And now it was too late because we were 20 minutes out from the target location and I couldn't afford the time. Before we get into it, where are you listening from today? And I want you to think about something while I tell you this story. What would you do if the person who put you in the worst moment of your professional life shared your last name? My name is Sloane Merritt. At the time of this story, I was 32 years old, a federal agent with the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I had been working a case for 11 months. 11 months of surveillance footage, of informant meetings in parking garages, of court orders and paper trails, and 3 separate grand jury appearances. We were 4 hours away from the biggest bust my field office had ever executed, and I was the case agent. My name was on every document. My signature authorized every wiretap. My brother's name is Kevin Merritt. 7 years older than me, built like a refrigerator, and for the past 14 years, a patrol officer with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. Growing up, Kevin was my hero. I want to say that clearly before I say anything else because this story is complicated, and the complicated parts are easier to understand if you know that first. He taught me to drive in an empty church parking lot when I was 15. He drove 4 hours to sit in the back of my DEA graduation ceremony, even though we'd barely spoken in 2 years at that point. He is not a villain. I need you to hold that. But he did point his gun at me, and I need to tell you exactly how it happened. We were in 2 separate vehicles, me and my partner, Agent Whitfield, in an unmarked sedan, and our tactical team in a van about a half-mile behind us. We were running dark, no lights, staying just under the speed limit because the last thing we needed was to spook anyone in the vicinity of the property we'd spent 4 months building a case on. The operation had a name. It had a timeline. It had 17 moving parts, and every single one of them depended on us arriving without anyone knowing we were coming. I saw the cruiser lights in my rearview mirror at 6:47 a.m. I thought, equipment check. Random, we'll badge him and keep moving. I told Whitfield to pull over. Procedure. You don't run from law enforcement even when you're law enforcement. Especially then, actually, because things go sideways fast when agencies don't coordinate, and the absolute last thing I needed was a county deputy calling in a pursuit on my federal plates. I rolled down my window. Cold air hit me hard. There was still ice on the guardrails. That particular kind of February ice that looks like someone breathed on metal and forgot to wipe it off. The footsteps crunching on the gravel shoulder. The flashlight. The standard license and registration that every patrol officer in America delivers like a line they've rehearsed 10,000 times. And then the flashlight moved to my face, and I heard him say in a voice that dropped about 6 registers from professional to something else entirely. Sloane, I said. Kevin. There was a pause that lasted maybe 2 seconds and felt like a year. He said, "What are you doing out here?" "I'm working," I said. "Kevin, I'm on a federal operation. I need you to let us go." What happened next? I've replayed it probably 400 times since then, and I still can't fully explain it. Maybe it was the unmarked plates. Maybe it was the fact that I wouldn't tell him what operation or what target. Maybe it was something else entirely, something that had been building for years between us that had nothing to do with that morning on that highway. But his hand went to his holster, and he said, in a voice I didn't recognize, "Step out of the vehicle." I said, "Kevin, don't step out of the vehicle, both of you." Whitfield looked at me. I gave him a small head shake. We stepped out. Kevin had his weapon drawn by the time I was standing on the shoulder. Not aimed at the ground, aimed at me, my brother, aimed a loaded weapon at me. I put my hands up slowly. The way you're trained to, the way that's supposed to communicate. I'm not a threat. Let's all calm down. Nobody has to make a decision they'll regret. I said, "Kevin, lower the weapon. I am a federal agent in the middle of a time-sensitive operation, and I need you to lower the weapon right now." He said, "You think that badge makes you better than everybody? You think you can just roll through my county without telling me anything, and I'm supposed to just wave you through? I looked at my brother, this man I had known my entire life, who had carried me on his back when I was 6 and sprained my ankle at the state fair, who had cried at our mother's funeral harder than anyone in that church. And I thought, I don't know what is happening right now. It's not about better, I said. Kevin, please. He kept the weapon raised for another 8 seconds. I counted. When you're staring down a gun barrel, even a familiar one, you count everything. You count because it gives your brain something to do that isn't panic. Then he lowered it, holstered it, said, I need to call this in. I said, you cannot call this in. If you call this in, you will compromise an 11-month investigation. He said, then come to the station with me. Kevin, come to the station or I call it in. Your choice. I want to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't she just tell him what the operation was? Why didn't she flash her credentials harder, or call her supervisor, or do the 17 other things that seem obvious from the outside? The answer is compartmentalization. Federal investigations exist in silos for a reason. The moment you start making exceptions, telling this person because they're family, briefing that department because it seems safe, is the moment your case starts leaking. I had a duty to 11 months of work, and to every informant who had trusted my office with their safety. My brother being my brother didn't change that duty. It made it harder. It didn't change it. So I went to the station. I told Whitfield to contact our supervisor and explain the delay. I told him not to move the TAC team. I got in the back of my brother's cruiser. Me, a federal agent, in the back of my brother's cruiser like a perp. And I rode 12 minutes to the Hamilton County Sheriff's substation on Route 32. The deputy at the front desk looked at me with undisguised curiosity. Kevin walked me past her without a word into a small conference room with a folding table and 4 chairs and a whiteboard that still had somebody's overtime schedule on it. He closed the door. He sat down across from me. I didn't sit. I stood with my arms crossed, and I looked at him and I said, you have exactly 10 minutes before this becomes a problem that can't be fixed. What operation? He said. I can't tell you that. Is it in my jurisdiction? I can't tell you that either. Sloane. He put both hands flat on the table. You're my little sister. I've been a cop for 14 years. I'm not the enemy here. I know you're not, I said. And I meant it. But right now you're in my way. And I need you to understand that there are people whose safety depends on what I'm doing today. And every minute I'm in this room is a minute I'm not where I need to be. He was quiet for a moment. The fluorescent lights in that room had a flicker in them. Just a slight one, barely perceptible. But in the silence, I noticed it. You always did this, he said. Did what? Made me feel like I was smaller than you. I stared at him. Kevin, that is not what is happening right now. You left, he said. You went to college, then Quantico, then DC, and you left. And now you're back and you can't even tell me what you're doing because I'm just county and you're federal and stop. I sat down then. Because this was a different conversation and I wasn't going to have it standing up. That is not why I can't tell you. You know that. You've been in law enforcement for 14 years, Kevin. You know why I can't tell you. He looked at the table. Something shifted in his face. Something that looked like a man realizing he's been angry about the wrong thing for the wrong reasons for a long time. The gun, he said quietly. I shouldn't have. No, I said. You shouldn't have. The door opened. I didn't know Sheriff Douglas Hale personally before that morning. I knew his name because everyone in federal law enforcement in Southern Ohio knows the name of the county sheriff, the way you know all the pieces on a board even if you don't play with them every day. He was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of man who had probably been imposing at 30 and had only gotten more so with time. He looked at me. Then he looked at my credentials, which I had placed on the table. Then he looked at me again. Agent Merritt, he said. Sheriff Hale, you're the case agent on Meridian. I didn't answer. Meridian was the operational code name. The fact that he knew it meant he'd already made a call in the 90 seconds between when he opened the door and now. My office received a coordination memo from your regional director 3 weeks ago, he said. We were briefed, not on details, but on the fact that a federal operation was running through our county this morning and we were asked to keep our units clear of the interstate between 6 and 8 a.m. I looked at my brother. Kevin was looking at the sheriff. Officer Merritt, the sheriff said, and his voice had changed, the tone of a man addressing a subordinate, not a peer. Did you stop a vehicle on I-71 this morning? Kevin said, Yes, sir. Did you detain the occupant? A pause. Yes, sir. And did you draw your service weapon during that stop? The fluorescent light flickered. Kevin's jaw worked. Yes, sir. Sheriff Hale looked at Kevin for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Then, and I will remember this for the rest of my career. He straightened, not a full military salute, but a straightening, a recognition, the kind of acknowledgement that law enforcement officers give to someone whose authority they respect. Agent Merritt, he said, my sincere apologies for the delay. We'll make sure you get back on the road immediately. Kevin's face. I keep coming back to Kevin's face in that moment, because it wasn't the face of someone who'd been caught. It was the face of someone who didn't understood something that maybe he should have understood a long time ago. That rank is real. That what I'd built was real. That his little sister hadn't left to get away from him. She'd left because there was something she was meant to do and she'd done it. I picked up my credentials. I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame. I said, Kev. He looked up. Dinner. Sunday. I'll drive to you. He nodded. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. We made the bust. I want to say that simply because I know some of you are wondering. We were 43 minutes behind schedule, but the tactical team held position, our informant held position, and the operation went exactly as planned. 18 arrests. Evidence that closed a distribution network that had been moving product through 3 states for over 4 years. My name is on that case file, so is Whitfield's. So are the names of every agent and analyst who spent 11 months building something worth building. I drove back to Columbus that night with the heat on high and no music, just road noise and darkness, and that particular kind of tire that lives behind your eyes. I kept thinking about what Kevin had said. You always made me feel smaller than you. I hadn't known he felt that way. Or maybe I had known and I'd filed it somewhere in the part of my brain that holds the things you're not ready to deal with. The drawer that sticks when you try to open it. The truth is that Kevin had been my hero for so long that it had never fully occurred to me that I might have become something to him. Something complicated. Something he was still figuring out. We're all figuring something out. That's the part that doesn't make it into the dramatic version of the story. The formal review of Kevin's conduct that morning was handled by the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office internally. I was not asked to participate, and I wouldn't have had jurisdiction even if I had been. What I know is what Kevin told me himself. 6 days later, sitting across from me at a diner booth in Loveland with a cup of coffee going cold between his hands, he received a formal letter of reprimand. It went into his file. He was required to complete a refresher course on interagency coordination protocols. He did not lose his job. He did not lose his pension. His colleagues didn't find out the specifics, only that there had been a coordination failure with a federal vehicle and that he had handled it poorly. That's the thing, he said, turning the coffee cup slowly. I keep telling myself it was a judgment call and I made the wrong one. But that's not really it, is it? No, I said, it's not. I think I wanted to show you that I could. He stopped, started again. That county isn't nothing. That what I do matters too. Kevin. I leaned forward. What you do does matter. It matters to every person in Hamilton County who calls 911 at 2 in the morning. That's not nothing. That's never been nothing. He looked at me for a moment like he was checking to see if I meant it. I meant it. You could have gotten shot, he said. I know that. I know what I did. I'm not trying to excuse it. I know. Are we okay? I picked up my coffee. We're working on it, I said. That's more than a lot of people get. Here's what I've been sitting with since that morning, and I want to share it with you because I think some of you have something similar living in your chest. The people who hurt us are rarely strangers. The moments that test us most are almost never clean. My brother loved me, and he put a gun in my face. And both of those things are true simultaneously, and I have to hold both of them because that is what real relationships actually require. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain. The little sister who left, who never called enough, who showed up in her county doing something she wouldn't explain and expected everyone to just accommodate her. I've thought about that version too. I don't think it's accurate, but I've thought about it. What I know is this: the job matters, the relationships matter. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, if you're lucky enough and patient enough, you get to keep both. My brother called me last month, not about anything important, just to ask if I'd seen the game the night before. We talked for 22 minutes about football and our cousin's new baby and whether the diner in Loveland was still as good as we remembered. It was, if you're dealing with something similar, a family member who doesn't understand your work, a relationship that's been strained by the different people you each become. I want you to know that Sunday dinner is sometimes enough. Starting over is sometimes just a phone call. You don't have to wait for the dramatic moment. The dramatic moment already happened. What comes after it is just life. And life, as it turns out, is the better story. I've thought a lot about what causes a moment like the one on that highway. Not in a legal sense. That part got sorted out in a conference room with HR paperwork and a letter that went into Kevin's file. I mean in the deeper sense. The kind of thinking you do at 11 at night when the case is closed and the adrenaline is finally gone and you're just a person lying in the dark trying to understand another person. What I keep coming back to is this: Kevin didn't draw that weapon because he was a bad cop. He drew it because he'd been carrying something for years that he'd never said out loud. And when he finally had a moment where he felt like he had power over the situation, over me, something in him reached for it before his training could stop him. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. There's a difference, and the difference matters. The choices we make when we feel small are the truest test of who we are. I've seen that play out in my work more times than I can count. People don't usually do terrible things from a place of strength. They do them from a place of fear. Fear of being irrelevant, fear of being left behind, fear that the people they love have moved into a world that no longer has room for them. Kevin was afraid. He would never have called it that, but I recognized it, because I'd felt versions of it myself. Every time I walked into a room full of people with more experience than me, every time I had to prove that my name on a case file meant something. The thing about integrity, and I mean real integrity, not the bumper sticker kind, is that it doesn't show up most clearly in the big moments. It shows up in the small ones. It showed up for me that morning when I chose not to blow the operation even though I was scared. It showed up for Kevin 6 days later when he sat across from me at that diner and didn't try to justify what he'd done. That took something. I want to give him credit for that, because it's easy to overlook the courage it takes to say, I was wrong, and I knew it the second it happened, and I've been sick about it ever since. What I want you to take from this: if you're carrying something similar, if there's someone in your life whose success has made you feel smaller, or if you're the one whose path has pulled you away from people you love, is that the distance is almost never about what it looks like on the surface. It's rarely about the job or the title or who makes more money. It's about the fear of being forgotten, of mattering less, and that fear, if you never name it, will eventually make you do something you can't take back. Name it. That's the work. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic confrontation, just an honest conversation over bad diner coffee with the person who used to carry you on their back at the state fair. That's where it starts. That's where most things worth saving actually get saved. Kevin and I are not all the way back to where we were. I'm not sure we ever will be exactly, but we're somewhere real, which is better than somewhere comfortable and hollow, and I'll take real over hollow every single time.